With more, here's Jennifer Parker from the ANU National Security College. Welcome, Jennifer. So things have been moving fast. What's your reaction to these latest developments?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me on, Roz. I guess some dramatic developments in the last 24 hours when we hear about the first conversation between a US president and Vladimir Putin in the last 2 years. Look, I think what we've heard in the last 24 hours, both from Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of Defense comments at the NATO meeting, and from President Trump today, they're not entirely unexpected. We did hear in the lead up to Trump's administration taking over, commentary from Keith Kellogg, who is the Trump administration envoy to Ukraine, laying out what he thought a peace deal could look like. And that did talk about putting off or denying Ukrainian membership of NATO. And it did talk about Ukraine having to give up some of its territory. So we've known for a long time that this was the kind of deal that the Trump administration was talking about. Of course, though, this would be a significant disappointment to Ukraine and Zelenskyy. It does look like Zelenskyy has been sidelined in these conversations. We saw during the week Zelenskyy asking to ensure that he was included in any conversations, offering to exchange some of the Kursk region in Russia that Ukraine has seized for some of the territory that Russia has seized in Ukraine. That appears to have been ignored and sidelined.
So if Ukraine, though, Jennifer, decided to fight on, would it have to do so without or with much reduced backing of the US, given Mr. Trump's refreshed relationship with Vladimir Putin, and that inevitably would lead to military defeat for Ukraine?
Look, potentially. I guess one of the things we've learnt about Trump's approach in the last couple of weeks is there's often a lot of large statements that are incrementally walked back on a little bit. So we do know there's a key meeting coming up in Munich on Friday on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference, where the Vice President of the US will sit down with Zelenskyy, Secretary of State from the US Marco Rubio, and probably Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth to start discussing this. So we don't actually know the details of what a peace deal could look like, but we have seen obviously some of the comments from Trump about what he thinks it might look like. It would be difficult, almost impossible for Ukraine to continue the fight without the US support. US support of ammunition, of weaponry, of intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance has been key to Ukraine's efforts over the last 3 years. And as much as there is a conversation about Europe stepping up to support Ukraine, and they have done stuff, they have not done as much as they probably should have. So it would be difficult for Ukraine to continue without US support. But it should be noted that US support hasn't been withdrawn. So they are still supporting Ukraine. There were comments in Trump's press conference about continuing to provide aid to Ukraine. But I suspect if the Ukraine didn't agree with the US's terms for a peace deal, that would be restricted.
So if Ukraine feels it has no other option but to go to the negotiating table, what does it have to bargain with?
Well, this is the challenge for Ukraine. Certainly the comments from Hegseth and Trump in the last 24 hours shows that in some ways they have pushed some of the comments from Vladimir Putin in the last 12 months. So Putin, over 6 months ago, outlined what he thought a peace deal would look like, which is guarantees that Ukraine couldn't join membership and giving up the Ukrainian territory, which is about 20% of Ukraine that Russia has already seized. Those lines from Hegseth and Trump in the last 24 hours seem to support Putin's view on this. This puts Ukraine in a really difficult position in terms of they don't have a lot to negotiate with. They do have, as I mentioned, the territory that they seized in Kursk from their offensive in August last year. Some of that has been reduced. We have heard comments from Putin in the last 24 hours that he would not negotiate on that. I guess we'll see what comes, but they're not in a great negotiating position, and they would largely have to accept, I think, what is being pushed by the Trump administration.